Has the John Birch Society convinced you that Convention of States is manipulating and utilizing hand selected clips to go ahead and make you believe that Antonin Scalia was in favor of Convention of States? Well, they're lying to you, and I'm about to prove it.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
I don't want you to ride. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the streets. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad.
Has the whole world gone crazy? Am I the only one around here who gives a shit about the rules?
You have the luxury of not knowing what I know.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
If you're a longtime conservative, someone who's been very, very constitutionally minded and very down on the patriotic side, like many Americans are, both from the classic liberal to just conservative in general, with the exception of the extremes on either side, right? And you might know the John Birch Society as an organization that is very constitutionally minded and in line with your views. So when you hear them say things in a negative fashion about the American people utilizing our power under Article 5 of the Constitution to call a convention of states to propose amendments to the Constitution designed to restrict the power of the federal government, and you hear them speak of it as in a negative way, immediately your instincts might tell you, well, it's the John Birch Society. I should believe these people. Well, I'm here to tell you, no, you should not. And for whatever their motive is, I don't really care. What I do care about is that what they're saying is no different than what Common Cause is saying. All right. And if you're not familiar with Common Cause, this is a George Soros funded organization, a large organization that has aligned some 250 other Soros-like organizations, many of which are Soros organizations, which you may know, like Daily Kos, Media Matters, the list goes on. So what they're doing, and when I say they're aligning with them, I don't mean like they're actually going to meetings together or that somehow John Birch Society is now under George Soros. I'm not saying that. Unlike them, who are trying to say that George Soros is funding the Convention of States movement. All right, because I'm not engaging in those type of tactics. And what type of tactics, you might ask? Well, I'm going to get into it in just a minute and give you clear examples of what I believe are the same tactics that the left uses to scare people. These are fear tactics. We all know them. We're aware of them. We've all been seeing these people who have been scared into wearing masks, seen these people who are scared into taking experimental drugs. These are all scare tactics, all right? And those two aren't new. This has been going on for decades, all right? And maybe it's not their intention to be this. Maybe they just feel so passionate about this that they feel like the ends justify the means. I'll let you decide whether the ends justify the means. But I want to go ahead and make this case. So what we're talking about today is Antonin Scalia, all right? If you're not familiar with Antonin Scalia is a U.S. Supreme Court justice who passed away some 6 years or so ago and was widely revered as one of the most staunch constitutional justices of the era. All right, and when I say widely hailed as such, if you're a classic liberal and you think for some reason that leftists didn't like him, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was one of his best friends, and they were staunch opponents on just about everything. And one of the links that I'm putting in so you could see everything in full context, unlike what John Birch Society does. You'll see if you watch that there was a piece done where the two of them were actually in the interview. You could hear them exchange and poke fun at each other for their views, but in the end, like you could see that there was clearly a friendship there, and that despite you can't be on more diametrically opposed sides of the aisle, the two of them actually got along. But I digress. Antonin Scalia has been pegged as someone on the Convention of States side that was pro-Convention of States and understood the importance of Article 5. And on the Marxist side, although in this case, not the Marxist, in this case, the John Birch side, okay? So this would be an argument you would expect from the Marxists, but John Birch Society is the one that came up with this argument that Scalia was actually against it. And they use clips. So Convention of States Project had posted a clip of a policy meeting and a policy debate with legal scholars, one of whom was Antonin Scalia. It was before he became a Supreme Court justice, and this was, I believe, 1979. And they sat down and kind of toggled through the idea of a convention of states and what's good, what's bad, etc., and let these scholars debate it. And at the time, although he was not yet Supreme Court justice, he was a well-respected legal mind in the United States, as was demonstrated some years later when he was appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States, then to be revered again as one of the most constitutionally minded justices on the court. So and I'm going to show you the clip Convention of States put up. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the video that John Birch Society put up first. And from there, you can then, and we're going to kind of break it down and go through it. But I want to just get the point out about how damaging John Birch Society has been to the people of the United States utilizing their power under Article 5. All right. When Common Cause or other Soros-type organizations come out against it, and they have a petition with some 250 wacko organizations against it and whatnot, they show up at the debates and try and fight against it. But in the end, when they fight against it, you kind of see where that's going, right? Because it's not that big a deal. You're like, all right, well, yeah, if the states take back control, that pretty much destroys Marxism. Therefore, it would make sense that Soros, Common Cause, the rest of those doo-doo-doos would be against it. But it doesn't make sense. It throws you for a loop when you see John Birch Society, who, you know, many of us agree with on virtually every other issue. It makes no sense. And to this day, I'm still perplexed at why they have the position that they have here. But that doesn't change the fact that it's dead wrong. And I want to make the case as to how they're making their argument, because it's twisted, and you should see that. Because if not brought to light like this, it would sound convincing. Like I could understand. Because listen to this exchange from two South Carolina representatives in the debate just before passing cause. And mind you, South Carolina has voted on this before and has not passed it. But this year they have. And part of it is because of this. Listen to this.
Again, I studied myself from being opposed initially to being supportive because I saw how significant the framers considered this to rebalance the power between the federal and the state government, and they were very, very committed to balanced political power, not excessive political power.
As I also came around. I was against the Convention of States, but I have also, after reading and reading and reading, have become convinced that you're absolutely correct.
All right, and here's the piece with that, right? Here's the point. If you listen, the most important thing that both of them said, the first one said, I studied my way to support for Convention of States. And then the next one says, you know, just like you, I was against Convention of States, but I've read my way. You know, I've done more reading and I want to explain, this is why I think John Birch Society is so damaging here, because they have influence like that. Like these representatives, prior to understanding the historical context and going further, didn't bother to go further because organizations like John Birch Society would approach them and start giving them this jazz about runaway conventions and all of this madness. And they believed it. And they believed it because they were ignorant to the topic. And when you have a trusted organization like that, that at least one that you trust, tell you these things, you tend to stay away from it. And they didn't vote against it even at that time. What they did is they punted it. And that's what keeps happening, is these things keep getting punted because legislators don't know. But they're now starting to read their way through. Thanks to our grassroots, they're now starting to take it a step further. They're now starting to see through the BS. All right. And it's important that we all understand that. So back to Scalia. So John Birch Society puts out this video in response to Convention of States Project putting out a video that was showing what seemed to be, and you'll make your own decision, but showing what seemed to be Scalia being in support of Convention of States. Now, John Birch Society would have you believe that this is not true, that Convention of States, and you'll hear it from him, deceptively used a clip that they handpicked out of a full 1 hour debate, all of which you can see in the links below. Because I'm not that way. I'll give you the full, I want you to go see the full thing because I think it makes the case. Let's go ahead and listen to the video from John Birch Society, and I'm going to stop it a couple of times to opine on some points that are being made that are going to be relevant later in this video.
Well, tremendous disservice. We have to talk about it to find out what's going on, because the press honestly is out of control. The level of dishonesty is out of control.
All right, so before we even get started, all right, they start this video off trying to imply that Trump is on their side. So they're immediately going at, these are tactics, folks, so it's important to understand this. If you're a Trump supporter, you know very well Trump has not opined publicly on convention of states. He has not said anything about it. We don't know to this day whether he's for or against. We just don't know. Ron DeSantis, he's come out in favor of it. He's come out in favor of it. Florida is on board already. Like that's a no-brainer. But Trump has never once said he's for or against. But yet they start their video off where they're about to bash the Convention of States movement with a Donald Trump clip so that they can align his hatred of fake media, which is something we can all share, with what they're about to say. And the two are absolutely have nothing to do with each other. Nothing to do. Trump has nothing to do with this. But they invoke him because immediately they're trying to get Trump supporters on their side. This is a tactic, and you should understand it because it's not something that jumps out to everybody when you first see something. All right? But for the record, Trump has no position on this whatsoever. This has nothing to do with Donald Trump. All right, let's go on next.
It's not just fake news we have to worry about. Organizations such as Convention of States Project are guilty of blatant dishonesty as well. COS recently posted this video of then Professor Antonin Scalia, where they selectively cut and piece together snippets from an hour-long video to make him sound as if he fully supports the Convention of States viewpoint. This is very deceptive. He was just a portion of what COS showed Scalia saying.
Congress is simply unwilling to give attention to many issues which it knows the people are concerned with, and which issues involve restrictions upon the federal government's own power. I think the founders foresaw that, and they provided this method in order to enable a convention to remedy that.
What COS failed to show is that this came from a 1979 public policy forum.
Okay, first of all, they didn't fail to show that this came from a 1979 public policy forum. All right, you could see from the video itself that this was old. Okay, you could see by the age of Scalia. So there's no deception in saying this came from 1979. But that picture is being painted, all right, as if, haha, they didn't tell you that this is old. Like, please, like you can't see that video and know that that's old? But what they don't address is why that matters. Why was Scalia dumb then? Like, I don't understand. But let's go on.
From the American Enterprise Institute. Back then, they gathered some of the nation's top authorities to discuss different views on vital issues. This particular segment's topic was entitled, A Constitutional Convention, How Well Would It Work?
And this is something he's going to get into later on that I just want to preempt for you so you're aware of it as it's happening. You're going to hear them call the convention, so you might, if you're into this and you've been following, you've heard this semantics debate, this crazy semantics debate that's been going on. Is it a constitutional convention? Is it a convention for amendments? All right. So, and the reason why that debate goes on is because of the John Birch Society, not because of Convention of States Project. Because what John Birch Society is trying to convince everyone, and I've done a full video making mockery of this assertion as well, is that our first convention, the very first constitutional convention that we had, somehow became a runaway convention, and that the founders did not do what they were commissioned to do. This argument is made with tons of misquotes and tactics that are done by not only John Birch, but by a bunch of other organizations to try and paint this picture using the exact tactics that they're accusing Convention of States now of doing. Now, I have a whole video out on this, and I'll put it at the end screen for this, at the end of this video, where we go into Federalist Papers 40 with James Madison and explain why it was not a runaway convention. But in the end, they're going to use this as a parsing argument for them. All right. And this one actually gets even better. Watch.
View one of Scalia's unedited responses.
All right, Professor Scalia, Richard Revere in the New Yorker suggested that the convention method of amendment might reinstate segregation and even slavery, throw out much or all of the Bill of Rights, eliminate the 14th Amendment's due process clause, and reverse any Supreme Court decision the members didn't like, and perhaps for good measure, eliminate the Supreme Court itself. Now, what would you anticipate from an unlimited convention?
Now, before he responds, keep in mind, this is the full unedited version that Cause was trying to hide from you. Listen to this response. Like, why would they even do this? I don't know. But listen to this response and tell me, like, my question is, why didn't Cause put this? They should have put this whole thing on there, but listen.
None of that. I suppose it might even pass a bill of attainder to hang Richard Revere. All of those things are possible, I suppose.
He's clearly mocking the notion, but let's go.
Just as it's possible that the Congress tomorrow might pass a law abolishing Social Security as of the next day, or eliminating Christmas. Sure, such things are possible, remotely possible. I don't have any fear that such proposals as extreme as he's talking about would come out of the Constitutional Convention. Surely.
Totally mocking the notion. Sure, it's possible. Just like, Congress may get together tomorrow and cancel Christmas or whatever. Like anything's possible is what he's saying. I don't know. I don't know if the John Birch Society thinks that you're not smart enough to figure out what Scalia is saying here, but it's pretty clear that whole notion is silly to him. It's just silly. And it is silly. And I've said this before. If the states did want to write resolutions that were wide open the way the first Constitutional Convention was, and we're saying things like, we just want you to create an unfirm government, whereas the original one said, we want you to create a firm government. Like, that's a very broad statement. And it's a broad statement with the existing document being the Articles of Confederation, specifically written to not create a firm national government. Like, if the states want to get together, and 34 of them want to put together a commission that gives that kind of scope and reach, then they can, but they're not. So it's irrelevant. And in the end, the mockery that Scalia does of this is just beautiful to me. Like, I was waiting for him when I watched this video. I was waiting for Scalia to really, say something pivotal here. And the whole time he just backs up the notion that we should do this.
Whether that risk is sufficient to cause you to be opposed to a constitutional convention depends upon how high you think the risk is and how necessary you think the convention is. If you thought the Congress were not necessary for any other purpose, the risk that it might abolish Social Security would probably be enough to cause you to tell them to go home. So it really comes down to whether you think a constitutional convention is necessary. I think it is necessary for some purposes, and I'm willing to accept what seems to me a minimal risk of intemperate action in order to have that achieved. The reason I feel it's necessary is, I think, the reason the founders put in this alternative method of obtaining a constitutional convention, that the Congress is simply unwilling to give attention to many issues which it knows the people are concerned with, and which issues involve restrictions upon the federal government's own power. I think the founders foresaw that, and they provided this method in order to enable a convention to remedy that. If the only way to get that convention is to take this minimal risk, then I think it is a reasonable risk to be undergone.
How on earth, like this little nerdy dude, like he's like smiling like he just showed you something that helps him. Like it bugs me out, but like I want you to see what I'm seeing, right? And I want to hear your comments. I want to hear, what your take on this is. But like, it's clear. Like, it's not even, I don't even see how there's, like, I don't even know why John Birch would even take this up. Like, I don't even know why JBS would even go down this road. But here we are. And they went down this road. And what baffled me the most is that nobody saw this video and called it out. Like everybody just took it, which is why I'm doing this, because I'm like, this is nonsense. And it's going to get worse. Watch.
Did you notice how then Professor Scalia never once said a convention of states? Instead, he called it a constitutional convention. Why would COS even want to use this clip? After all, COS...
All right, so here's where they're going to get into, and that's so funny. Why would COS want to use this clip? Like we all heard it. We all heard it. I don't know what he watched. I don't know what he got out of that. Maybe he thought that the initial question being posed was the key part. But Scalia clearly made a mockery of the notion of a runaway convention and went on to say, yeah, it's worth, that the risk is so minuscule that it's worth doing. And when he says minuscule, he's talking about equivalent to Congress canceling Christmas. All right. And it's like, this is what, and this was in 1979. The situation is 10 times worse today in so many other areas that were even unfathomable in 1979. But even then, even with just the issues of the day, he was like, let's do this. They come right out with the, notice that he said constitutional convention. This is a play on words because they created this term called con-con, right? And this is completely a leftist narrative, con-con, but it's been picked up by the conservatives who follow this line of thought. And it's supposed to just be a pun, like constitutional convention, yet use con as if the whole thing is a con. And like, that's where this debate over semantics came in. But here's the funny thing about the debate over semantics, because like, I don't know what this guy is thinking, but watch this.
And their friends have repeatedly stated that a constitutional convention and a convention of states are not the same.
And the critical move is to say we're talking about a constitutional convention. The thing that I think we had in 1787. And what I said in my introduction was, we're not talking about a constitutional convention.
Is this a constitutional convention?
No, it's a convention of amendments only.
People get confused between a constitutional convention and a convention of the states under Article 5, properly called a convention for the proposing amendments.
Remember what he just said, because the rest of this stuff, they weren't getting into technical literature, the rest of those clips he used. They were basically just making the point that this is not to revise the entire Constitution, that this was a convention to create amendments. But what he says right here, and I'm going to rewind it just a little bit so you can hear it again.
Properly called a convention for the proposing amendments.
A convention for proposing amendments, okay? Now, I want you to keep that at the top of your head. A convention for proposing amendments. This is a clip that was taken by the John Birch Society to say that convention of states is misrepresenting the idea that this is a constitutional convention. He calls them out for calling this, wait, what did he call it?
A convention for the proposing amendments.
A convention for proposing amendments. Let's see how that's relevant.
The processes and the procedures and the scope are entirely different.
When you look at the practice in the states, and when you look at what the Constitution talks about, it's not talking about creating a constitutional convention. Those words don't exist.
That's correct. The words constitutional convention do not appear in the text of Article 5, but neither does the phrase convention of states. Article 5 actually calls it a convention for proposing amendments.
Whoa, hold on. Did he just... Where did I hear that term before? A convention for proposing amendments.
A convention for the proposing amendments.
You see the twisted stuff that's going on here? You see what's happening here, right? So what's happening here is that, so he turns around, he plays that clip, right, of cause action saying it's properly called, the only one that says this is the proper name, okay? And it didn't say, it didn't say the proper name is Convention of States, okay? It said the proper name was a convention for proposing amendments. He used that clip and then goes on to say...
That's correct. The words constitutional convention do not appear in the text of Article 5.
So again, acknowledges that what he's saying, that it's a constitutional convention, is nowhere mentioned. But then instead of saying, well, what they're saying the proper term is also nowhere mentioned, he goes on and says...
But neither does the phrase convention of states.
Convention of States is nowhere mentioned either. Well, no one said that was the proper term according to your own clips. And then goes further to take the one guy who says that there is a proper name for this, and then gives the correct one, and then goes on to quote the Constitution, validating that he was correct. The mind screwing here is baffling me. I don't understand. I don't understand how this video was never challenged. I don't understand. I welcome anyone. Take your best freaking PhD from the John Birch Society. I will more than be happy to have them on this show and go at it toe-to-toe. More than happy. PhD does not intimidate me or anyone else these days. We've gotten done talking about how many PhDs Harvard cranks out, talking about modern monetary theory being the right way to go. Yeah, it means nothing anymore until it's validated, all right? And the fact is, telling me the days of you saying I'm a PhD and me somehow being impressed instinctively by the name have long since passed. Long since passed. The fact of the matter is I can read too. And this type of nonsense, these are tactics, folks. These are tactics. And you should know them. And then question, why? Why is John Birch Society, this organization that I normally agree with, why are they using tactics? The only thing you need to know for sure, because I don't really care about their other positions, this is the only one that bothers me. And in the end, what you need to know for sure is that anyone who's using tactics is on the wrong side of an issue. Because if you're on the right side of an issue, you don't have to use tactics. You could do what I'm doing here, and you could just put the full links below so that you can watch them all. Because I encourage you to, unlike them, where I had to go find these myself. But we're not done. You know what? I'm not done tearing this guy up yet, so let's just finish.
Historically, this same convention is also known as a constitutional convention. If you refer to Black's Law Dictionary, which is the trusted legal dictionary of law for over a century, you will find that since 1910, they have consistently defined a constitutional convention as, quote, a duly constituted assembly of delegates or representatives of the people of a state or nation for the purpose of framing, revising, or amending its constitution.
Nothing in what he just said changes the reality of what's going on. Nowhere in this definition that he is showing you does it make his case. Nowhere. Like the fact that there are multiple reasons that you could call a convention. All right, you could say they all technically are involving the Constitution, therefore they're constituted. This is all semantics, BS, and wordplay. That's what this is, okay? It's of framing, revising, or amending. Okay, well, we just got done telling you this particular one is being done under Article 5, which is for amending, which you've already acknowledged. So what are you saying? What are you saying? Because it's not helping you. It is not helping you. This video, by the way, is being played for you in its entirety. I don't want to hear crap from the John Birch Society that I clipped this video up and took it out of context. You're hearing it exactly as they published it on YouTube. Unbelievable.
So aren't these two the same thing? COS is clearly deceiving America. Since COS loves using clips and quotes of Scalia, let's show you what they don't want you to see. Here is Justice Scalia's comments from a 2014 interview.
I certainly would not want a constitutional convention. I mean, whoa. Who knows what would come out of that?
I think the clip...
Now, that's a whoa. If I had a nickel for every time someone took that out of context quote and threw it out there and tried to make the case that that was proof that Scalia... Couple of things on this, okay? Couple of things. Number one, again, with the tactics, he just got done starting this video off accusing Convention of States. And I'm going to play the whole clip for you, by the way. So stay with me, because we're going to break this little troll-looking guy down to his basics, all right? The bottom line is he does exactly what he's accusing Convention of States of doing, all right? Now, when you hear that, right, when you hear that quote, right, where he says, whoa, I definitely wouldn't call a convention. It sounds like he's being asked, are you for or against Convention of States, right? I mean, that's the inference that comes to that, right? When you hear that, whoa, He's responding to something, right? Is it the question? Is he being asked the question, are you for or against the Convention of States? No, he's not. No, he's not. And before I even go ahead, when I'm done with this, there's another piece that Kaz left out that I want you to see to make the case again from 1979. And then I'm going to come back and give you the full quote of what Scalia says in that whoa moment, so that this little doo-doo right here can understand it. Because maybe he didn't even the editors just gave it to him and he went, whoa, and just believed it. I don't know. But that's not what we're here for. And the fact of the matter is, when I tell people you need to read more in order to get to the bottom of what Convention of States is really about and what its historical context is, this is why. Because this guy, doo-doo-doos like this, are out there all over the place. Publius Holder and a bunch of other doo-doo-doos that are just pumping out this garbage and using these tactics again to dissuade you and to persuade you into the wrong area by trying to paint things as they aren't, and then accusing others of doing the same thing.
Speaks for itself. Be careful. COS may sound sincere, but don't fall for their deception. An Article 5 convention, a convention of states, a constitutional convention, or whatever you want to call it, is too great a risk because we have no idea what would come out of it, so don't be fooled. Instead, a much safer way to rein in our out-of-control government is through Article 6, not 5. Article 6 obligates both federal and state officials to oppose unconstitutional laws passed by Congress. The same can be said for unconstitutional decisions made by the Supreme Court. By enforcing Article 6, both federal and state officials will not only not enforce any laws, treaties, or Supreme Court decisions that are unconstitutional, they are also required to oppose them. One way to oppose such unconstitutional actions by the federal government, short of educating the electorate and voting new people into office, is by convincing state legislators to nullify a particular unconstitutional law, treaty, or Supreme Court decision. That, in a nutshell, is the Article 6 solution. And if you're willing, for the sake of our great country, we the people can do it. So forget about Article 5 and let's get to work on Article 6.
All right, so Article 6, nullification. If you're not familiar with the nullification, a lot of these doo-doo-doos promote nullification. It's trying to undo piece by piece a century's worth of horrific Supreme Court decisions is going to create absolute chaos. Yet that is what they want to avoid. They literally want you to go back and start hand-picking all of the bad decisions that have taken place. I don't know what nullification's not going to change the 17th Amendment, all right, which is huge for me. It's not going to overturn the 16th Amendment, all right, which is income tax. It's not, and the 17th Amendment is where they took state control out of the Senate, the federal Senate, where they used to be appointed by our local legislators, so that if they were an issue, if they did start to become Mitt Romney, that our legislatures we could just pressure the guy, our local legislator, and have them pull that person and replace him. That power was taken away. Okay, that power was taken away. So once someone gets elected, they can go rogue and do whatever the hell they want for 6 years, and the electorate has no control. All right? So nullification does nothing to change those things. But I don't want to go off on a point about nullification. I want to give you another quote that Kaz left out from Scalia. Let's listen to this quote.
I listed first among my the things I would like to have considered structural issues at the federal level. I don't have a lack of trust in the American people. I mean, I'm the one up here who's least terrified of a convention. Yeah, we've come a long way.
I'm the one up here who's least terrified of a convention. Just saying. I don't know how John Birch missed that one, but the John Birch Society must have slipped by him. I'm sure it was an accident. We've
gotten over a lot of problems, but the fact remains that there is a widespread, deep feeling of powerlessness in the country. One sees it on every side with respect to many issues, not just the budget issues.
Now, mind you, this was 1979. How do you think that he would feel now? It's wrap your head around that. The gold standard was just recently dropped. Then we haven't seen the full ramifications of inflation and other issues that have come up with government overreach. How do you think he honestly would? Just be honest with yourself. How do you think he would feel now? We'll get into what he said later on in life in a moment.
The people do not feel that their wishes are observed. They're heard, but they're not observed, particularly at the federal level. Now, the Congress has come up with a lot of palliatives for this problem, among which I was on a panel a few days ago discussing the legislative veto, for example, which to my mind doesn't solve the problem at all. The basic problem is simply that the Congress has become professionalized. It has an interest much higher than ever existed before in remaining in office. It has a bureaucracy that is serving it. It is much more subject to the power of individualized pressure groups as opposed to the unorganized feelings of the majority of the citizens. All of these reasons have created this feeling, which is real and which I think has a proper basis, of powerlessness. One remedy for that, the one specifically provided in the Constitution, is this amendment process which bypasses the Congress.
Hold on, Justice Scalia, could you please say that again? Because I don't think I heard that correctly.
One specifically provided in the Constitution is this amendment process which bypasses the Congress. I would like to see that amendment process used just once at first. I don't much care what it's used for the first time. I think just having it used once will exert an enormous influence upon both the Congress and the Supreme Court, I think. I think after that the Congress and the Court will behave much better. Sure, I wouldn't want a convention for some silly purpose, of course not. But I think there are a lot of serious purposes around, a lot of matters that profoundly concern the American people and as to which they can't have any voice. I really want to see the process used responsibly on a serious issue so that the shibboleth, the Richard Rovere nonsense about, the end of the world is coming, can be put to rest and we can learn how to use the process responsibly in the future.
All right, so he's saying right there, that he not only is he in support of it, he wants to see it used regardless of what the topic is. Of course, not wanting silly topics to be brought up. But his point was, and I've made this point myself, which I was quite happy to see him make as well, is that even if we just got term limits passed and the other two couldn't get ratified, that would suck. But you know what? It would absolutely still do what Scalia is saying here, is set the precedent and end this "we've never used this before" nonsense. Because this is an important mechanism. Now, I want to get into, just for a second, this whole idea of him later on in life in 2014 being so against it. And again, you heard that quote where he says, "Whoa, I definitely wouldn't call a convention." All right, well, why is that all you hear? Right? Now, it couldn't be because John Birch Society selectively took a clip and utilized it to make a point out of context, could it? I mean, they just got done. They just got done suggesting that Trump was in... Oh, wait, no, we decided Trump, that was a tactic as well. They just got done saying Convention of States was taking clips out of context and playing them selectively to make a case. Well, when you hear Justice Scalia say, "Whoa, I'm not going to back up, I certainly wouldn't call a convention." When you hear him say that, all right, you would think that he was just asked the question, do you support a convention of states? Right? But he wasn't. And that's where it gets fun. Here we go, John Birch Society. Here's one from my little trolley friend, the little doot-da-doo in the other video. Here we go.
Let's show you what they don't want you to see. Here is Justice Scalia's comments from a 2014 interview.
This is what he said.
I certainly would not want a constitutional convention. I mean, whoa. Who knows what would come out of that?
Here is a question from Seth Dawson of the Office of Congressman Denny Hecht.
So this is the rest of it, okay? And this is the whole quote in context. It comes after the entire conversation. They had a Q&A, so this went off broadcast now, and is at the very end of the video. So if you're going in, you could do what I did and watch the entire thing, which actually is quite fascinating to look at the dynamic between Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Scalia. But like, if you're just trying to get to this quote to see that I didn't manipulate it, you can go, it's about the 1 hour and 7 minute point. All right, so it's after it leaves the broadcast, and they do this off-air Q&A where people have written in letters or whatnot, or maybe sent emails and such to ask questions. And one of them was this question regarding the Second Amendment.
Justice Stevens recently suggested a constitutional amendment to modify the Second Amendment. If you could amend the Constitution in one way, what would it be and why? Justice Scalia.
I certainly would not want a constitutional convention. I mean, whoa. Who knows what would come out of that? But if there were a targeted amendment that...
Now, before I even let him go on, so keep in mind, this question was posed to him as someone who was advocating amending the Second Amendment. All right, or making changes to the Second Amendment. And his response was, and then they said, if you could amend it, how would you and why? So his first response is not a convention, because we're talking about the Second Amendment here, folks, right? And yeah, I wouldn't want a convention on that. I don't even want that talked about, frankly, and neither does he. But listen to what he goes on to say. And this is the fun part. So if you watch that and you went, no, the clear question was, how would you amend it? And he said, don't do a convention. Okay, let's just listen to the rest of what he says.
But if there were a targeted amendment that were adopted by the states, I think the only provision I would amend is the amendment provision.
Huh? You'd amend the amendment provision? That's interesting.
I figured out at one time what percentage of the populace could prevent an amendment to the Constitution. And if you take a bare majority in the smallest states by population, I think something less than 2% of the people can prevent a constitutional amendment. It ought to be hard, but it shouldn't be that hard.
It ought to be hard, but it shouldn't be that hard. Look, understand context, right? And that's what this entire exercise was about. Now, the Birch video was self-destructive on its own. Really, I could have just did this and just let that dude beat himself up, and inflict self-damage throughout and let it go. But this quote right here was the one that keeps getting brought up the most. And the other one I showed you was one that doesn't get shown very often. All right. And I had to go find the original videos and the original discussions and watch the hour plus of footage to get to the points that I wanted to see and to get to the context that I wanted to see had. And after seeing that context, my attitude was, okay, there's nothing in what he said right there in that context that makes me think that he spent an hour in an hour-long debate talking about, as the most staunch advocate to do this, for him to turn around, some 40 years later, not even 40 years later, like 35 years later, and turn around and say, you know what, everything I said back then was nonsense. So, the bottom line is, as he said in the original, in the 79 debate, the policy debate, is that it really depends on the purpose, okay, and the level, of how bad, what the issue is, right? And in his mind, fiscal restraints was clearly an issue that was not going to be addressed by Congress. Clearly. Okay? And you can't turn around. Good luck with the nullification where the states are just going to turn around and start saying, I'm not paying taxes. We're not going to submit federal income tax anymore. Well, who's protecting the citizen from the IRS when federal agents come to your door and start arresting people? Nobody. This idea that you could just say no and, it's like a Nancy Reagan slogan. and it's going to be equally as effective. The fact of the matter is the Constitution needs to be clearer on what the restraints of federal government are, because the Supreme Court has slowly given that power to the federal government. And that needs to be made clear. And that is exactly what the amendment process was designed to do. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope we showed you a little something today. In the end, go watch the full-length discussions on both sides. You don't need to agree with me. You just need to be aware. All right? And as far as what our focus should be, stop with all this nonsense. We need to call this convention. It needs to get called. Get with Convention of States Project. Get with them, Cause Action. Learn how to help, learn how to pitch in, learn how to make a difference. Whether it's a social media warrior or more active participation, get involved. Know who your local legislatures are. Know that they're the most important people. Know that they are the most powerful entity in this country, and know that that's where you should be going to invoke real change. Until next time, I'm out.
And like that,